Are we doing this? Really? Wait for it. Are we doing this? Wait for it. Pow!
What the fuck?
WTF.
And it's also, what the fuck?
What's wrong with me? It's time for WTF.
What the fuck?
With Mark Maron.
What's up? What the fuckers? What the fuckies? Whatever it is Mark Maron says. It's another podcast hosted by a cishet presenting white dude in his soon-to-be early 30s. I don't know why I want to have a podcast. I guess I like hearing myself talk, but also I genuinely feel like talking out loud helps me process my own thoughts and feelings better. Like to understand myself better. It's a lot easier to talk out loud to myself than it is to have a conversation with another person. I genuinely feel like I'm a good conversationalist, but I have a lot of social anxiety that seems to have developed slowly over the years to the point where if I can avoid having a conversation with someone I don't know, I will at all costs. Like, it is a huge inconvenience for me to have to speak to a human being I don't know or like, which makes it hard to have a podcast because traditionally the usual format is you interview people. So I guess we'll see how it goes. I definitely have people in mind that I'd like to have on this show and have conversations with, but most of them are people I know in real life or already admire. So I don't know. I hope the difference isn't that I'm seeking to get something out of them or know that I can. That feels predetermined and masturbatory. But then again, so does just talking to myself out loud and then recording it and then broadcasting it to the world for, I guess, like realistically 0 people to actually listen to. And then, much like I'm doing now, I go down the rabbit hole of like, am I thinking too much about this? At what point does being self-aware feed into my ego and cause me to become even more pretentious than I would be if I had just simply assumed my thoughts would be worth sharing with the world? I really hate living in this post-ironic, eternally online age where we're all expected to have unrealistic levels of self-actualization and emotional intelligence, and if we aren't operating perfectly in any and every given moment, we're like problematic or whatever. I don't know. It's a completely insane and unsustainable way to live, in my opinion. I don't understand how people in Brooklyn do it. One of the most exciting and important films of the year and possibly ever? A superhero drama, Scorsese-esque crime thriller, neo-noir adjacent action thrill ride helmed by a 19-year-old Australian kid, produced on a micro-budget and released on YouTube for free. Contains more passion in each frame than literally every tentpole blockbuster I've seen this year combined. A 3-hour-long epic, brimming with creativity and ambition. Its earnestness and bluntness are unmistakably that of a teenager, but add to the charm rather than detract from the narrative, which is complex both in concept and execution. It is insane to me that this A exists and B works as well as it does. I've been doing a deep dive into folk film on YouTube, which I find inspirational to me personally and valuable to the arts at large. I am not exaggerating when I say you can watch this movie right now and discover the birth of a future master of the craft in real time. And there are so many more artists producing great stuff and putting it out there for you to view free of charge. This must have been what it was like to be around in the 70s, watching American independent film develop and take off. We are in a magical time. I love this. I love movies. I love art. That is my review of Void Man, directed by Mohit Subedi on Letterboxd. It is currently the most popular review of this particular film. And I mean every word. It is a folk film. There's a part of this movement where artists have taken it upon themselves to say, fuck the system, fuck any sort of traditional, quote unquote, way of producing films through a studio or financiers. They just decide to make stuff and they release it, distribute it for free on platforms such as YouTube. I'm fascinated by this sort of movement. And I watched this movie, Void Man, on December 29th, 2021, and it's stayed with me for what has now been a little over a year. I recently had the opportunity to connect with Mohit over Instagram, and I said, fuck it, you know what? I'm an admirer of this guy, and I love his movie. And he agreed to sit down with me for a sort of very unstructured, unscripted interview, and I was really happy with the interview. I think it started out a little awkward, as you'll hear. I sort of, tried to open with my sense of humor and try to just, I don't know. I'm still new to the whole interviewing thing, but as we sort of like warmed up to each other, I found our conversation to be very interesting and engaging, and Mohit is very eloquent and articulate. And I found a lot of what he had to say to be truthfully poignant and worth sharing. So I hope that you all enjoy this interview as much as I enjoyed giving it, and make sure at some point, either before, during, or after you listen, to check out Voidman, which you can find on YouTube for absolutely free.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, man?
I'm going good. How you going?
It's going really, really well. You consent to being recorded and everything, right?
Yeah, I
Okay,
consent.
thank you. No,
It'd be
it's good.
very it'd be very strange if I declined that
Yeah, for
request.
the interview portion of this.
Yeah.
You're looking pretty good, dude. I like the beard.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's a little new thing I'm experimenting with every January. I like test out the beard and then I'm always disappointed and I shave it off. Looking
Well,
pretty good yourself.
thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I actually just shaved mine to try to. I have the opposite
That's right.
problem
Yeah.
where I'm always like trying this, and then
Oh, really? No, it
yeah,
looks
because I'm
good.
just.
It looks good.
Well, thank you. I'm like a scruffy. It doesn't come in nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I'm really inconsistent on the sides.
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
an okay goatee, but the sides are very are lacking.
Sounds like I know. I dig the goatee, man.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
think you could be like a sort of celebrity chef.
Yeah. Well, I feel like every director has to have like a bearded phase at some point.
Oh yeah, I was watching like old clips of Martin Scorsese. He had a nice
Yeah.
beard.
Yeah, when the black hair and the beard, that was like peak, arguably peak Scorsese.
Arguably peak aesthetic Scorsese. Yeah.
Yeah. And him holding the gun, that's
Oof.
prime time.
Prime time. What
Yeah.
other, I mean, we'll get into the real interview in a second, but like what other director beards? Every director has a beard phase?
I mean, like Stanley Kubrick had that like iconic beard. Um, I don't know. There's like Brian De Palma. I feel like a lot of those filmmakers, like in the 70s and 80s, just rocking the beard and they were making some classics.
Yeah.
Francis Ford Coppola,
I was
he's
gonna say
also got a good.
Coppola, Lucas, Spielberg.
Yeah, yeah. Spielberg did have the beard. See, when they have the beard in the 80s, that's when you know it's going to be a good film.
It's the 80s beard.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Did
good.
Lynch ever have a beard?
Lynch has a beard right now, I
Oh, well
believe.
then it shows what I know.
It's like over quarantine because he would do those YouTube
Of
videos, and he
course, the
had the
weather
beard.
report. Yes.
Yeah, so you know he's cooking up something good. Yeah.
Good morning. Today's weather is like he kind of sounds like that,
Yeah.
right? Kind of like a Kermit thing going
Yeah.
on.
He's Lynch. Lynch is good. Lynch is good.
Okay. Well, thanks for talking with me. I know it's like early where you are, or like hopefully not too early.
Oh no, it's 10 a.m. It's fine.
10 a.m. It's fine. So you're just kind of hanging out in Australia. Is it true that it's the Australian summer, like the seasons are reversed?
Yes, it is the summer right now in Australia, though. Australia has very uh particular weather, very interesting weather. So like it's summer right now, but it's expected to rain a lot and stuff like that.
Mm,
So we have a very warped weather system, but I'm not
okay.
complaining.
So worked weather. So I had like 30 minutes on the weather, so I should just cut all that.
Yeah, 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 I think you should. Yeah. I mean, I could go
Okay.
deep on it. I could go deep, but we don't want to do that.
Well, no, we can go we'll go deep on plenty of things. So the last time I had heard, I don't want to say of you or from you, you made this tiny, barely a movie, tiny short movie called
Right.
Void Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
Little
is
thing.
just a little tiny thing,
Yeah.
barely a short.
Little side project, side hustle I had got going
Yeah,
on.
it's not even your main kind of thing, just like on the side. And a lot of what I wanted to talk to you about today was like pertains to Void Man. It's the first time I had heard of you. I know you had made stuff before. Um, so we're gonna probably have to like lead up to that, like context for that. But
Mm,
I mean, Void Man really really blew me away personally.
thank you. Thank you. I
Um,
appreciate that.
yeah, yeah, and like obviously, yeah, in like the best ways. And
I'd
I
hope
guess
so.
the question, yeah, no, of course. The question, no, I invited you on here to just like trash.
I would happily do that.
No, come on, come on, come on. That'd be crazy though. If somebody was like, I finally got you in the Zoom and it's just
I'll
like,
take the challenge.
I have the screen share, just the whiteboard, like here's point by point.
Yeah.
No, no, I loved it. I mean, loved, still present tense, love it. But I have to ask, like, and this is like a purposely vague, open-ended question. I just like, I remember watching it and being like, why? Like, why would somebody do this? And that's not like a bad in like a bad connotation. I just mean it's like I personally, and I'm a little older than you, but like when I was the age that you were when you made Void Man, that's not what I was thinking about doing. Like that was not,
Yep.
it's like a huge scope of ambition. And I guess like maybe we should start earlier but I just want to know like what was it or when was it that you were like, this is what I need to be doing right now artistically?
I think, well, when I was 17, I made my first feature soap opera, and it was it was like a very kind of formative experience for myself because I sort of realized like what a human being can do, like just in terms of like, putting your mind to something and really setting out to do it. And it wasn't even like a soap opera was not meant to be a feature film. And then it turns out it was like, after I edited the whole thing and I was, oh my God, I've made a feature film. And once that, I don't know, it just connected some kind of wire in my brain. And I realized like, wow, like this was 2 hours. This was accidental, So I just kind of sat down and said, well, like if I accidentally made a feature film, then if I like purposely made a feature film that like, I wanted it to be a feature, like I could really go for it. And so I just after soap opera, and I was very happy with the success of soap opera. Like at 17, I didn't think it would have, like 10,000 views on YouTube or like be, especially in my school, which is ultimately like that's like my central audience at the time. It was like a pretty decent deal. Like I would walk around school and people would come up to me that I didn't even know, and they would say, I watched your film, I really enjoyed it, and especially a lot of the younger kids, they would I became a celebrity amongst them. At least I told myself that. And then so that gave me the confidence, and I said, okay, you know what, like I'm gonna go for it with my next film. And I also knew that my time was fleeting with like the potential I had and the capabilities I had, like in the sense of, I'm very young, and when you're young, you have a lot more opportunity to really waste time, I suppose, or really, I said this on the Doom Productions interview, but like you don't need to worry about like paying rent or the adult things. When you're a youth, you have a lot of time on your hands. So I wanted to take advantage of that, and so I sat down, wrote this screenplay. It was 190 pages long, 49,000 words long, and I just thought, wow, like this is a lot. I wasn't even intending. I knew I kind of wanted to do something a little bit bigger, but I was not intending for this sprawling epic. Um, and so I said, okay, well, this is what I have. And so then I went out and shot it. I had a 4 hour cut of it at one point, trim, and then I got it to where it was. But it was a very, very strenuous and very intense process. And I knew it was going to be like hard and tough, but I did not realize like how intense and tolling it would be. But yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, there's so much in there. But I really, yeah, what you said about taking advantage of kind of like what youth offers you in terms of like sort of freedom from responsibility in a lot of ways. That's like kind of what I mean, where it was like when I was in your position at 17, I was like not thinking that way. And so the fact
Mm,
that you have or had the foresight to be thinking about that, I think that is in and of itself somewhat related to like talent, like an innate kind of like artistic mind of like, no, this is what I should be doing right now. And
yeah,
so a soap opera, what year is that filmed and made in?
that's 2019, August 1st,
2019.
2019.
29. So you're 17 years old in 2019, uh,
Yeah.
which means you're born in 2002. Jesus Christ, I'm so old.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
it.
um, so you're 17 and you're sitting down and you say it was an accident. And like I've always kind of been like, you don't accidentally make a feature movie. That's just can't happen.
Right.
So are you? I'm assuming you're somebody who you growing up, you're loving movies. How did like movies come into your life?
Yeah, so the story I always cite is when I was 10 years old, I saw The Dark Knight Rises and it changed my life. And then I was introduced to Christopher Nolan, and I watched, I binged watched all of his films, and I saw the through line of the artist through all the different properties and realized that there's like a singular voice behind all these different films. And I made the connection between like Inception and The Dark Knight, and I realized like, wow, these are like two very different films on the surface, like when you're a 10-year-old, but then I saw the artist's voice in those both those films, and like, then the concept of a director kind of clicked with me, and like I recognized like what a director is in relation to a film, and started to like understand the bones of filmmaking. So that's the story I cite of how I got into films. But then there is also like other phases I went through, like during 2020, during the pandemic, I started to like explore a lot of like older cinema. Like
Mhm.
I started watching Andrei Tarkovsky, like
Oh yeah,
Ivan's Childhood, a lot of Soviet cinema, like that really spoke to me. And I watched a bit of like Ingmar Bergman, complicated names. I
yeah.
watched The
Those
Seventh
goddamn
Seal, and
Europeans.
that yeah, I watched The Seventh Seal, and that was like a very like, wow, I'm really feeling something from this like older film. I just watched it on YouTube, and I just my like cinematic kind of consciousness started to expand as I like went further and further back. And I think the Criterion Closet and Criterion Channel was like a big help as well of sort of like introducing me to like cinema. I would watch these like Criterion Closet videos with
Mhm.
like, the Safdie brothers or Barry Jenkins or whatever, and they would be name dropping these films, and I would be like, Jesus Christ, I've never heard of any of these films, and I like made me feel like I thought I knew everything about cinema at 18 or 17, and then I watch these videos. I'm like, geez, like wow, there's a whole world of cinema out there for me to kind of dig my teeth into. So then I was motivated, and I went back and I started to, I kind of there was this during the pandemic especially, there was this like transitory period where I would be watching sort of the very well-known filmmakers, and like the most edgy stuff I'd watch would be like Stanley Kubrick. Maybe I watch like A Clockwork Orange and be like, wow, like this is very daring. And then during the pandemic I went further and further back, and slower cinema, older cinema, it's like a bit more inaccessible to a younger mind, but once push through and it starts to click with you, it's very impactful. And then, so I think there is a huge cinematic jump between soap opera and Voidman, because I started to engage with a lot of different cinematic properties that really sort of reshaped my understanding of cinema.
That's so interesting. Yeah, to hear you say going from like Kubrick to Tarkovsky, just like that alone
Yeah,
is like a huge a huge jump. They're
it
just two
is.
totally different styles. And to be sort of influenced equally by like an American auteur. Well, I guess I mean he's like British, but this sort of like Hollywood sort of like
He kind of commanded the like
sensibilities.
American consciousness. So he is. I
Yeah,
I would say he's an American, even though he's British.
I mean it's not. But then like that's like directly like soccer is like not like a Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan movie at all. You know what I mean? So was is there like a legacy of Australian cinema that you sort of identify with or are you interested in? I know like there aren't like we have like I couldn't even name an Australian filmmaker off the top of my head. Maybe Andrea Arnold.
I think Nicholas Roeg, who did Walkabout, he's one. The girl who did The Nightingale, I'm forgetting her name, and
Oh,
The
of course,
Babadook.
Jennifer Ken. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
Jennifer Kent. Yeah, she's I think also Jennifer Lane or Lame. I think it's Jennifer Lame who's an editor. She edited Manchester by the Sea. She did Tenet recently. Marriage Story. She's also up there. There's like obviously George Miller with Mad Max.
Oh, sure, of
Um,
course. Well, yeah, of
there
course.
are a few kind of Australian filmmakers who like are very kind of impactful, like have like these like films that are very like instrumental in like the history of cinema, but they kind of like fly under the radar because there hasn't been a huge kind of Australian push. Um, but yeah, in terms of like Australian filmmakers, I would say, I would say I am actually lacking in that department. Like I do need to do the deep dive. I have actually been planning to do the Australian deep dive for a while. But I would say, yeah, just there are filmmakers that out there. Baz Luhrmann is another one. He made Elvis. There are a few
Sure.
filmmakers who have like Australian roots, who are making films that are like sort of really, impacting the institution, that are just kind of you don't really realize that they're there until you realize that they're there, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, because every time you named one of those names, I was like, oh, of course. But I don't think of them as
Yeah,
necessarily like Australian filmmakers because
yeah,
they operate in sort of our conventional, the
yeah.
Hollywood
Well,
or
I think
studio
I
systems.
think Australia doesn't have that big of a film industry, whereas like comparatively to the United States or to Britain. So it's much more it's different. So the Australian filmmakers who do kind of make it big, they make it big by going to Hollywood or going to, Britain.
Of course. Yeah, that makes logical sense. um, so okay, so you're a teenager and you're watching all this stuff. So I'm so fixated on this thing. I'm sorry, this is like the third time I'm bringing it up, but like you accidentally made a feature film. So
Yes.
what's the goal going in? Like, are you making shorts like before this? Are you sort of just like what's happening that you're like, okay, this is the project that I'm committing to right now?
So the first screenplay I ever wrote, or at least like the one I cite, is a soap opera.
Mm,
So I'd literally never written a screenplay before a soap opera. Well, I had attempted to write a screenplay, but I kind of gave up like one third through. So my first real screenplay was a soap opera. Before a soap opera, I was just kind of making short films. Some of them can be found on my YouTube channel. Just very like little things. I believe the longest film that I had made before a soap opera was 17 minutes long.
okay.
So it was a huge, huge jump from that 17-minute little short to a 2 hour and 12-minute film. But my intentionality was just like I wanted soap opera to be kind of a short film, like a 40-minute short film. Um, uh, and so I kind of wrote the screenplay, and it was like I think it was around 80 pages, somewhere around there. And I realized that like, okay, in my head, I just thought like, I will fly through this, and like each 2 pages will be about a minute of film. And then I went out and I shot it, and I shot it over the course of 2 weeks. And it was a very intense process back then, especially when I'm 17. I don't really like know what I'm doing. No, I still don't know what I'm doing, but like back then I really don't know what I'm doing. And I'm shooting it on an iPhone, and it's not meant to be anything serious or anything big or anything like it's not meant to, be a part of the canon, I suppose. And then over the course of 2 weeks, I thought, Jesus Christ, this is like getting really tough. I'm like spending a lot of time on this. I didn't understand why, and there were times towards the end of soap opera, I was like, do I even want to be a filmmaker anymore? Like I'm putting a lot of effort into something that like I was perceiving to be very little and very small. And I don't know, I just didn't recognize like how long the film actually would be. And then I think once I like kind of composed the film together and edited the scenes, I purposely didn't want to look at the runtime until I had everything ready, and then I put it all together and I could see like, okay, this is what I've created. So I purposely stayed away and try not to, calculate the runtime in my head. And then eventually, I edited the entire thing, put the whole thing together, sat back, looked at that runtime and thought, oh my God, this is over 2 hours long. I don't know. I'm not sure how that happened. Soap opera was made in a very quick amount of time. Like the whole thing was made in about a month.
Wow.
So it was like, as in like we filmed July 5th, my 17th birthday, and then it was released August 1st. So it was like bang, 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 bang,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
Though I was writing it for like about 4 months. Um, so when I think I finished the edit like late July, and I saw it was 2 hours, and I thought, Jesus Christ. And at the time, looking back, I probably should have like, cut down on it more. I feel like there's like long stretches of the films that like I kind of like, you know, I should have taken a bit out, which is something I actually like, really tried to put into effect in Voidman, believe it or not, even though Voidman's 3 hours. Like the the original cut of Voidman was 4 hours long, and so I cut an hour out of that film, and made it to a point where I felt like, yeah, this is honestly like a state of comfort, and like I feel like I've actually really trimmed this down. And maybe from the outside looking in, it doesn't like look that way because it's like 3 hours long, and it's like, wow, like you could have cut this out, could have cut that out. But from my perspective, I already cut out an hour of the film, and like, but yeah, I just feel like I trimmed Avoid Man down, which is quite the sentence. But with soap opera, once it was once it was completed, and I just, I was 17 at the time, and I didn't think anything. Like I was just like, wow, I've actually made a feature film. Well, time to upload it. I didn't realize that it would, springboard into this whole thing, and it would lead to Void Man. It would lead to this like such success. So yeah, I'm not like, I am kind of thinking about like, is this truly my first feature film? Because I feel like with features, you do need a sense of like intentionality. And like,
Mhm.
because it was unintentionally like a feature length, I am kind of questioning like, is this like feature film one or like feature film zero? And Void Man's really like feature film one. Um, but I think ultimately it is the feature, it is the first feature, and it is part of the DNA, part of the canon. So yeah.
Part of the Mohit Subedi canon filmography.
Yeah.
Um, that's so interesting. So you're not, so you say you just kind of like put it together, you upload it, and then you were surprised at the response. So you're not aware at this time of like the sort of folk filmmaking movement that's happening.
I have like literally zero clue of folk filmmaking, like whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I literally like don't know anything. I believe folk filmmaking kind of really picked up steam when Chlorine came out. I believe like
Probably, yeah.
early 2020, very early 2020. Um, and so Soap Opera came out in 2019, so it was before even Chlorine. And then I think Chlorine comes out. I believe it's Chlorine. I might be wrong on that, but Chlorine comes out, kind of blows up. Then um and then I remember I found Dan Lotz because there's this YouTuber Austin McConnell who kind of like did some stuff with Dan Lotz. But in the video where Dan Lotz and Austin McConnell like first kind of interact, where because Austin McConnell made this video about like, my subscribers did something over the summer. Here it is. He mentions chlorine, but in that video he also mentions soap opera. Soap opera is in there, and so that was, and then I believe Dan Lotz watched soap opera, and I later on watched chlorine. So yeah, I did not know about folk filmmaking. I wasn't influenced by folk filmmaking. Maybe, I think at the time when I made soap opera, I didn't know you could make feature films.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was like a task that's just like insurmountable, and then I did it, and then later on I found folk filmmaking. I think folk filmmaking is also showing that like long form feature filmmaking is possible. So yeah, I had no understanding of folk filmmaking at the time.
That's so cool. Yeah, because I guess me coming into it later, like looking back, because I obviously saw you through Void Man when it was, I came in through it through Joel Haver being a
Right.
fan of
Yeah.
his film. I know Pretend That You Love Me came out in 2020 as well. And then
Yeah.
so, which is like one of my favorites. And then
Yeah.
Find Dan, and then find Cody Clark. And then you find all these people, find you. So that's so interesting. Yeah, I guess it would make sense. The timeline works out that way. So when you're making this movie, you're 17 years old. Who are you working with? How are you getting these people to work with you? Do you find it like challenging? Is it easy to be like, hey, I have this iPhone, I have this idea, we're all going to go make a movie? Or is it a little more complicated than that? Or like what's happening?
Yeah, it's definitely it's always a complicated process to find like people to be in your film. I think again, it's going back to the youth thing. I just recognized, I realized around me that like, wow, I'm in high school. I have like, I have a few friends. This is the prime time to be making stuff because everyone is available. And there was this sense of like making a film and everyone at school kind of watching it. And so there was that kind of appeal. I just recognize that like, I'm in high school. This is like a very like rare, like when this ends, it ends, and I'm not going to really be able to do this again. So I wanted to just seize opportunity of that, and I asked a few friends. Everyone at that point kind of wanted to be in my, well, I shouldn't say everyone, but there were quite a few people who wanted to be in my films because it was just a kind of a like a close kind of
Mhm.
friend thing, and so there were quite a few people who were down to do it, and they're like, "Yep, let's do it." And you know, some of them it was just like one day of filming, and they were happy to be in it. Others it was like 5 days, and that was something. So yeah, it was in like in retrospect, it was kind of easy, but in the moment, it was kind of challenging. Voidman was even more challenging because it's like soap opera we filmed over like two weeks. Voidman was filmed over like 3 months, so I was like asking a lot, but I think because of soap opera and because of the success of soap opera and what I could achieve and what everyone could see what I could achieve, there was more motivation to really give it your all in Voidman and go even bigger and deeper. Um, but yeah, it is quite a challenge, but in retrospect, it really like I'll never I don't think I won't have that kind of ease of access to a crew like that for a very long time.
Yeah, I know. I mean, of course, right? When you have all the friends together. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. So Void Man was, you describe a lack of intentionality with soap opera, but Void Man is full of intentionality. If I can read
Yeah.
your words directly from the horse's mouth for a second, in big
Yeah.
bold letters, this is Void Man is my attempt.
Yeah.
And so maybe this was, I mean, a couple of years ago, or maybe just last year. What is time? I have no idea. I
Yeah.
genuinely have zero.
COVID
It would
really
have been two
really
years ago.
fucked up time.
No, a little over a year ago. It doesn't matter. Sorry, this isn't
About
one
a year
important.
ago, yeah.
It was a while ago. I think those words are really powerful because we're talking about, I mean, now like this idea of like, oh, it's possible to like create art, own your art, distribute your art for free and have people and engage a community. And so your attempt, I mean, is that a phrase that you still stand by, that you describe yourself that way or this film that way?
Yeah,
I'm
I
just trying to
think so
get deeper
because I
into your
think
intentionality with this film.
yeah, I mean I think every film, every kind of artistic expression is an attempt to kind of unpack something. Um it can, and this something can be a lot of things. It can be something kind of personal or an emotion or a concept or even just kind of like some kind of commercial viability. But ultimately, like every piece of art that is created it's an attempt to achieve something through the art. I don't think you just, kind of create art just for the sake of creating it. Like there has to be an element of kind of um you're trying to achieve something through the creation of the art, right? Like even if it's just getting it done. So when I say Voidman is my attempt, I think like, any piece of art anyone creates is an attempt. And then in that review, I kind of go deeper into what the attempt actually is, which is like the attempt to kind of unpack and kind of understand like all these kind of emotions and these ideas and these concepts that were kind of floating around my head for the previous few years. And it kind of all culminated in this artistic expression to kind of like unpack it all and kind of lay it out all on the table and really express a couple of ideas and a couple of things that I was thinking about when I was growing up. And yeah, so I think there definitely was intentionality. Whereas soap opera, I think there's a little bit of intentionality with soap opera, like that, conceptually there's like a few themes I'm playing around with. But Voidman, I really went like deep with the themes. Like I wanted to like there's a huge color theory in the film. There's a lot of like warring ideologies, a lot of, you know, I wanted to like have a lot of ideas and I wanted to play around with a lot of things. So there's definitely a huge amount of kind of intentionality, I suppose. I feel like I've said that word a lot, but I feel like it is important. And I think with art, successful art, there is less like a sense of direction and a sense of like purpose as to why it exists. And then if you can achieve that purpose, then in my opinion, it is a successful piece of art.
Right. No, yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I agree with you. And for Voidman specifically, I mean, yeah, your themes, I see a little bit of crossover in terms of themes. I mean, they're both, this is oversimplifying, of course, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong, but you seem very interested in this idea of like crime, which might sound like simple, but I think like the question of crime of like, moral righteousness. I mean, you have kind of like two people, as an sort of analogous to the illicit drug trade, um, engaging in this practice despite or maybe because of what the law says and not wanting to
Right.
contradict like the government say. And then in Void Man, you're literally playing a vigilante, somebody
Yeah.
who is actively fighting against the institution of a government. So I guess I want to know, like, for you, like where kind of the seeds from these ideas, like what makes you want to say these things, this sort of anti-establishment, like where does that live in you? I'm so curious.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure, but I think you did like you have hit the nail on the head there. Like I think I'm very interested in as to certain things are like why certain things exist the way they do, and I like to kind of dig deeper into like, you know, crime is a great example of like why is crime the way it is in this certain area, and then you can dig deeper into the institution, and it's very fascinating to see like, because of the failures of the institution, the crime rate goes up, or certain crimes happen more often, and it's like it's just, I don't know, it's very fascinating to me. It's something that I think like subconsciously always trying to unpack. I think I'm also very interested in how, you know an environment kind of like contextualizes the people in it, or maybe you're raised by like a family. How does that family impact the person in it? Like I just saw the Fablemans. I'm not sure if you've seen the
Not yet.
Fablemans.
I'm gonna watch it soon. I promise. I promise everybody.
It's quite good. It spoke to me, and I think, especially if you're an aspiring filmmaker, it's very touching. But I think that's also a film that really spoke to me because you get to see how, it's obviously the story of Steven Spielberg, his father, the engineer, and his mother, the artist, how those two things kind of warring and colliding kind of created him. That's something that is very, just things like that, when you kind of unpack the layers of something, I don't know, that's just very, very appealing to me. I'm very much, I like layers. I like to, be able to unpack and strip back things and really get to the meat of things. I like things that have different components all working together. I think that's just how my brain works. And I think that is actually part of the reason I love cinema, is because there are so many different components playing together to create this product. And it's, when I watch a movie, I'm seeing all the different parts of it, in lieu with one another. And so I think, yeah, I think just I'm not sure why that is, why I am interested by the, sort of the meta text or the metadata of something, but it just, yeah, I don't know. It is what it is, I suppose.
No, of course. I mean, yeah, I mean, subject and environment and the relationship between each other. I mean,
Yeah.
drama 101, tons of
Yeah.
rich themes can be mined from that. But I just the way that you specifically go about it in this term of like very underground and very oppositional, very like confrontational. And I think that comes maybe with youth a little bit. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
I
just
think
watch. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
there is like so obviously like I am sort of a child of like immigrant parents. I'm growing up like in Australia. I think that definitely does have a factor into it, like kind of growing up in an environment that is very different to me, and there's that sense of opposition. I think that just like reflecting on what you've asked and what I've just said, I think like that is actually one of the like fundamental things that kind of does motivate me and does pique my interest because there is this sense of like, well, at least when I was younger, there was this sense of like otherness that I kind of brought to the table because I am from like my parents are rooted from a different land and they have very different values and I was kind of raised very differently to everyone around me. So I think that is a very like motivational factor to why I'm interested in these stories and why I'm interested into like how the environment shapes the individual and whatnot.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. That's really fascinating. So do you consider yourself to be Australian? Which is maybe like a really
I
loaded
do
question.
ultimately consider myself to be Australian because I think I do share the values of the West, and I ultimately was, I was born and raised here in Australia. I'm not really, my parents are Nepalese, and they were born and raised in Nepal, but I am really, I was born and bred here, and I share the West's values, and I am ultimately Australian.
Wow. So how do people come from Nepal to Australia? Like, what do your parents do?
Well, I mean, I think it's just the classic immigrant story where, they're in Nepal and it's, it's a kind of a developing country and they need to go to the land of opportunity, which is, generally just some kind of Western land. And then they go and then they study, they get jobs, and then they try to, build their own establishment so that their children have a good future. I think like that's pretty much exactly what they did. And they're quite comfortable now and that, I think they've successfully achieved all of that and they have two children now. One of them is a very successful engineer and the other one's a aspiring artist, so there's a bit of dichotomy and was it all worth it, but hopefully it was.
Hopefully it was. Are they supportive of you come to them and you're like, I'm gonna be a filmmaker? Are they like, oh no, God, no, please? Or are they just like, yeah, man, like you're good at this, do whatever you want?
They're very cautious people by nature because they had to be. So I think they are ultimately supportive, but they're also they're very forward thinking. They have a lot of foresight, so they tell me like, look, you want to be an artist, that's okay, but it's a very tricky industry to kind of break into, and it's very the odds are against you. You need to account for that. So they kind of encourage me to also go to university, study other things and whatnot, and I'm allowed to pursue my passion as long as I ensure that my establishment is still like very much rooted in the ground. And like if the artistic pursuit fails, I have something to fall back on. And I think, when I was younger, I kind of like protest against that and I didn't really agree with that. But now as I get older, I'm kind of like, no, that was actually like very wise. And it's tough. It's a tough decision and it's a tough kind of ultimatum to put on your child, but it is the right one, I think, because yeah, this might not work out, like this might, pursuing art, it's a very tough industry. And they are just people who believe in having a core kind of foundation. They don't like to play with the risk. So
Mhm.
I respect them and they are ultimately supportive. When I came to them and I told them, I'm making a feature film, they said with the soap opera, they said, yep, go for it. They helped me out when I came to them and said, hey, I'm making Void Man. They said, cool, and then they bought me my parents and my brother bought me, helped me buy the camera and the lens. And then a couple of my friends, helped me buy the gimbal and whatnot. So they were very supportive. And ultimately, without them, Void Man wouldn't be created. So that's why my parents and my brother are credited as producers in the films because they were without their support, I ultimately wouldn't have made the film. So they're very cautious people, but they are supportive and caring at the end of the day.
That's really sweet. Yeah, I guess it had been a long time since I'd seen the credits. I didn't remember,
Yeah, that's okay.
but that's really touching. I think that's really sweet. So you had like your friends and then your collaborators from soap opera, and then you had your family. So you're like, I'm making this I'm declaring I'm making a feature film. I'm making Void Man. I'm making a superhero crime epic. And everybody's
Yeah.
just like, yeah, we're on board. Like, you didn't feel like you had to pitch this to anybody? You weren't like, okay, so it's going to be an insane journey odyssey into like the darkest depths of the human soul. They're just like, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do it. Let's go.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I'm very with spoilers and with like kind of plot details, I keep my cards very close to the chest. So only two people read the screenplay beforehand. Everyone else, I just gave them the scenes on the day. They didn't
Wow.
know anything. They didn't know the length. They didn't know the scale. I mean, I kind of hinted like this is a big film, guys, and they're like, yeah, we know, like it's gonna be 2 hours, and I was like, yeah, well, we'll see about that. And then so I really I kind of kept my cards close to the chest, but they recognize that like okay, this is he's making a film, and I did shoot it over the summer of 2020 going into 2021.
Mhm.
So that was a huge, I had a lot of time on my hands. Um and so they knew it was kind of big, but there was a lot of different components, a lot of different characters in the film. I think the three people that it really kind of like dawned on, like, wow, this film is really big, is was myself who plays Void Man, Jonathan who plays Cantharis, and Olivia who plays Angela. Because those three characters are like, the big three kind of, um, and they're in the film a lot. And so they both of them, Olivia and Jonathan, worked really hard because Jonathan, he obviously has a lot to carry on the film, and Olivia was a very like instrumental in like getting people around. I didn't even have my license when I made the film, so she
Oh
was
my
the one who was
God.
kind of driving people around. She was this producer, and she worked really hard. They both worked really hard, and I think they understood the weight of the film. And then obviously when it came out, I think hopefully it did pay off because it is a 3 hour epic, and I quite enjoy the fact that I have this little 3 hour epic that I made when I was 19. I have that for the rest of my life, and I can show that to my children or whoever I come across.
No, I mean, and I was joking at the beginning of this call when I was obviously the little being that it's 3 hours long. I think it's absolutely
Right.
something to
Yeah.
be proud of. I think it definitely paid off. It's such an achievement, and the more that you talk about it, the more impressive it is to me. All three of you guys give amazing performances. Um, but so wait, so you gave people pages on the day. So how are you? What's a day like in production? Like, how are you organizing this? There are really intricate set pieces in this movie.
Yeah,
No
there
prep
are.
time?
No, yeah. It's just thinking about it is making me stressed. It was tough. I think so the way I work is at least on this independent level is I kind of create a schedule for like the best case scenario as to how I can create a film. So with soap opera, the best case scenario I could film the entire thing in 6 days. And it ended up being 2 weeks because it never goes to the best case scenario. Like when you make a film, like it's always things always go wrong, and you kind of have to account for that. So the best case scenario for Void Man, if everything went according to plan and we did it perfectly every single day, I would have been able to make the entire film in 22 days, which is 22 days. That's a long time, but that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, it's like 90 days, which is ultimately what it ended up being, or like 82
Wow.
days, like something
Wow.
ridiculously inflated over a course of 3 months. So I had this kind of best case scenario, and so I would bring people on the day, and I would give them the scene, and I'd say, "This is what you're doing today," and then they'd be like, "Okay," and then we'd either make the day or we wouldn't make the day, and sometimes we make the day, but most of the time we wouldn't make the day, and so I would say, "Okay, well, we come back tomorrow and we finish it off," and then we come back tomorrow, and maybe we'd finish it off, maybe we wouldn't, and then we'd have to do that another day, and it just kind of started to inflate. And there are a lot of intricate set pieces. I think I was very, very, very like locked into this film for a very long time. Like it like occupied so much of my brain space. So I knew every single line of dialogue like off by heart. Like when an actor would say a line and I'd be recording them, I would just know like I would know somehow like no, you've messed this line up. Like you have not done this line correctly. And I would go back to the screenplay. And they'd have misplaced a word or something. And I don't know. I was very, very kind of locked in. It was like this very deep concentration because I had this incredible motivation. I had this like huge kind of blind faith that it would be this like incredible thing. I think you need to have a little bit of that as an artist, but I don't think you can't have too much of that because you really you really get deep into the project, and I really got deep into it. And so I was micromanaging so much, and the intricate set pieces were tough to kind of manage, but I think ultimately you just do it day by day, and I think some of the set pieces they pay off, they worked out well, and some of them like could have been improved upon. That like that's just inevitable at this level. But yeah, I don't know. I just work. You just work day by day.
Day by day. So 90 day by day for 90 days is about 3 months.
Yeah.
And no one like drops out. No one is like, this is insane. I can't believe you're making me do this. Like, that's incredible.
Well, I mean, like there was a little bit of protest because it like towards the end it was very tolling. I didn't even want to like I was kind of giving up on the film towards the end. I was like, dude, like this is getting too much. Like I just want this to be over because I went from like high school 3 month break. That whole 3 months I'm working on Void Man, and then literally like the day we finished, the next day I'm like going to university. So
Oh my God.
I was just working nonstop, and I was like, I've really kind of fucked myself here. Like there's like I'm in a corner, and I'm like I've done this to myself, and so there was a little bit of protest. People being like this is like when is this going to end? Like this is like a huge thing you're doing, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I didn't even truly anticipate like how big and how tough it was going to be. I anticipated it to be very intense, but it superseded that kind of expectation. I think when you first start making the film, like in the first third, which I thought was, like, oh, this is like I'm halfway through, but really I was, only like a sixth of the way through. There's still like the film could still fall apart. But I think once you hit a point, like maybe like halfway through or 66% of the way through, at that point, you cannot afford the film to like drop out. And so I don't know. I did towards the end. I tried to be very lenient. Like there were times where crew members like they like we agreed to shoot on the day, and then the day came and they never showed up, and I called
Oh
them. They
man.
were asleep in bed, and I was like, you know what, just have the day off. And I like hang up the phone and try to just like work through it or film something else. I tried to be lenient, but I was asking for a lot from the get-go. So it was very tough, but I don't know. I think I'm just very lucky that the film didn't completely like, break down, and I managed to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, I don't think you can completely count luck. I mean, obviously there's a vision, there's a passion that attracts people.
Yeah.
Um, to pull it through. But no, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously luck is involved. It's just such a massive project to have it kind of not go as smoothly as maybe you would have liked it to, but relatively smoothly. Your entire last
I mean,
summer.
all things considered, like the fact
Yeah.
that it was made, that's smooth.
Well, the fact that it was made, but the fact that it's come out, and I mean, I'm not trying to blow smoke. Like I watched this movie, it was like New Year's Day or Christmas Day or something like that. Um, and I was just like, it was one of those things where I'm like, okay, like a 3 hour YouTube video, but
Yeah.
you're just glued to the screen and compelled. And it's like, I couldn't
How
believe
did
it.
you
And then,
can I ask like how did you actually like come across the film?
yeah.
Like what is the story of you watching Void Man?
Story of me watching Void Man. Let's see if I can even remember it. I think because I'm wearing a fucking Joel Haver shirt right now. Like
Oh, very nice.
I'm super into Joel, and I was watching all of his stuff. I saw Pretend That You Love Me. I thought it was like beautiful and amazing. And so I'm clicking around, and I think actually what it was is I found. I feel so bad. I'm going to mispronounce his name. Myrtle.
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 He's got a very tough name to pronounce.
Yeah, and I'm a dumb American, so
Right.
those two things meeting in the middle. So I found him and his interview with you, where you were talking about Void Man, and he was being a little tongue in cheek, is like, "Oh, maybe your next thing is going to be this huge thing," and you're like, "That's not
Yeah.
too far off track." I
I
just
remember that's a great moment. That's incredible foresight.
really, and then you were like, "It's out," and it happened. It was like, "It's here. Please watch it." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll watch anything. Like, I'll give anything a shot." I was in a situation where I was like living in a place. It was just really, I had a lot of time, and so I'm like, yeah, let's. I give anything 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
you vomited up black goo, and I was like, I'm here. Like I gotta know what the fuck is going on. And it just kept like, I don't mean to be patronizing, but it's like the context of the age that you are and how the scope of what you're doing, despite maybe the lack of resources, is so genuinely inspiring. But then the movie's actually good because you can say
Right. Yeah.
you can say that about a lot of stuff that gets up on like this on this level in this sphere, right, on YouTube. And I think folk filmmaking, I think it's really brave. Anybody who does it, I genuinely commend them. But there's better films than others, and yours is one of the best ones. It just is. The fact that you achieved what you achieved, and I thought it was so amazing. And that's when I went to Letterboxd. I have no followers, but I felt compelled. I was like, people need to see that this is what's happening. This is what's happening out there. Is people are being like, fuck waiting. Like, I've been trying to sell scripts for years. I've been trying to get projects started the conventional way, and it just doesn't happen. And so people like you who are just like, no, yeah, of course I'm just going to do it myself. I think it's amazing. And it turned out really well. So I guess that's a long sort of roundabout way to answer your question, but just complete happenstance. And then luckily by the time it really was like the day or the day after that I found even who you were. And then you were like, okay, it's up, it's posted. I was like, oh, I guess I'll watch this new thing. I saw it before I even saw your first one. And then I went back and watched your first one. But I was like on the Void Man train. I was like sending it to people and they were like, Caleb, this is 3 hours long. Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, no, trust me. So you have like a very small not small in New York City, but there's a social circle in New York City that is like on the Void Man train. Just
wow. That's incredible. That's actually very, very inspiring.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet, right?
100%.
You just like put it up there and then anyone in the world can just be like, what is goo? What is he doing?
Yeah. I think the 3 hour runtime is kind of like a hurdle for quite a few people. I think it was actually quite a surprise, like how much people kind of like push back against the 3 hour runtime. I suppose in retrospect it does kind of make sense, but in the moment I thought like the 3 hour runtime was like a crowning achievement, you know, like, oh my God, like longest folk film ever. And I suppose like on the surface it feels like, you know, wow, this is really extended, like you could have cut this down. But I mean, I really like, you know, I poured everything into like every single frame, every single shot. This film took me like 1 entire year to edit. It was like a very, very strenuous process. And I spent my entire 2021 right here on this bed, editing that film on this very laptop. And just like, you know, I worked intensely hard. And I think the pushback of the 3 hour runtime was like really kind of was surprising, but I suppose in retrospect makes a lot of sense because it's like, that's a big investment, you know, like that's a huge amount of time allocated. And I think I've certainly learned a few things from the response to the runtime. I think in terms of like accessibility and like commercial viability, I think going forward with my next film, I think it will be shorter. Or maybe I will double down and it'll be, you know, 5.5 hours. I'm not sure, but
I would love
that. Yeah, I did go through a phase after Void Man where I was like, you know what, my next project is going to be a 6-part miniseries. And I'm just going to go even deeper. But I think now I am actually leaning towards a bit of a shorter runtime because I have both Soap Opera and Void Man are like, you know, pretty long respectively. So I think like the 90-minute runtime, I think I could really achieve something very finite, very, very like quality product with that kind of limited runtime.
Yeah, I don't know if you watch any of like the Hollywood Reporter roundtables.
No, I definitely do.
That they make out. Yeah, I just saw the writers one, and Ryan Johnson was like, I'm chasing that 85-minute runtime. It'll never happen.
Yeah,
but I'm chasing the 85-minute movie. And yeah, something very like tight and controlled. But what really impressed me about Void Man, and you say that you cut out an hour, like around an hour. And I was watching and I was like, this feels like, I know it's 3 hours, but in terms of like flow, it feels like very tight. And it feels like very like it's paced extraordinarily well. And so maybe that is a result of you chopping an hour out of it, and that's just the result of it. So despite 3 hours, it's like it's snappy, it's moving. And that's, I think, for me, not that it's on me or on anyone to like forgive a runtime, but like, I don't know, there are like 90-minute movies that feel slow and that feel long. And so when you have all the energetic, like people are running through the houses and there's guns and all these things are happening, and I'm just like, oh my God, he's vomiting goo. And I keep saying, I want you to fucking explain what the fuck was going on with the goo, but it's okay. We can talk about it later. You don't have to. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's not like the length of time, it's how that time is spent. And I think when I'm sending people with no context a 3-hour YouTube video, they're like, what the fuck is this going to be? Right? Without understanding, no, this is a feature film and it's a 3-hour movie. And so instead of watching 6 episodes of the Great British Bake Off, watch this like piece of art, you know? And so that's how I tried to present it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I mean, I think like on YouTube, especially like as a feature, like it's not, especially if you don't know this kind of folk filmmaking outlet. It's like, what is this 3-hour video called Void Man brackets 4K? Like, why is this why is this being sent to me? And I think I feel like a lot of people watching it just being like, what is this? It doesn't really click with them. That is like meant to be a film. You're meant to sit down, you're meant to like engage with it as a film. But going back to what you were saying, I think, yeah, like the hour that I cut out it was just a lot of trimming. Like I wanted this film to like pace accordingly. I think the first like 42 minutes or 38 minutes something is like I'm very proud of because it moves very, very fluidly, very smoothly. And I think, I mean, I'm very proud of the pace of the film. I think it is quite accessible, surprisingly, with the 3 hour runtime. But maybe that's just me and my interpretation. But I think I am very proud of how I cut the film together and how it moves from point A to point Z, so quickly with so much to do. And I think what you were mentioning earlier, like with folk filmmaking, kind of like how there are 90-minute films that feel very, very long. Like I definitely didn't want to fall into that trap of like just extending it just to be 3 hours. Like I was trying to make this film as short as possible, not as long as possible, which I think is like not what people kind of perceived, or not the like understanding of the film. And it is technically, it is now the longest folk film, but I was just trying to make it tight. I was trying to make it, as small and concise as possible, and it was 3 hours. So yeah, I think, there is a folk film coming out. I believe it's called Morana, which is like a community folk film with like a bunch of different folk filmmakers. I think like there's like 42 plus folk filmmakers who are all filming scenes like individually, and then someone is going to compose all the scenes together and make this like cohesive film. And apparently that's meant to be the longest. That's going to be the longest folk film potentially. So I'm excited for that. But yeah.
So then the Voidman director's cut will come out, and it'll just be
the Voidman director. I'm actually anti-director's cut.
Okay, now we're getting into it. Now we got some hot
Now
takes.
we're getting into it.
So we're as a rule, anti-director's cut, and you have to explain yourself now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if it's a rule, but like in terms of like a philosophical sense, I believe like, well, for me, there is no like at a folk filmmaking level, the film I release is the director's cut,
Of course,
right? And I don't like, I believe in like the product just being the product and maintaining itself. Now, obviously, there are a few exceptions, like Blade Runner, the original, the studio like jumped in and really, tried to like Frankenstein it into what it wanted to be. But then there's even an argument that like the theatrical cut of Blade Runner is the best cut, and the voiceover is like actually like a good thing, because it's like the film, like all films are kind of products of these like warring ideologies, or warring like sort of senses of direction. So like there's the studio and there's the artist, and those two things kind of fighting it out and creating the product. Arguably, like that is like what the film is at the Hollywood scale, at the commercial level. I mean, I personally like the final cut of Blade Runner compared to the theatrical, but I also know that Martin Scorsese also does not do director's cuts or deleted scenes. I actually also don't really believe in deleted scenes as well, because of his philosophy, which is like, if the scene's deleted, it's deleted for a reason. And I believe in the kind of singularity of the product. Now, there are obviously like exceptions, like Zack Snyder's Justice League compared to the 2017 Justice League. That's like the modern day director's cut equivalent, modern day like director's example. But I don't know. I believe that like if you can, if you are in the position of making a film and the studio doesn't like, just completely rip it out of your hands and just take it from you, and you are still working on it in contrast with the studio, then it is ultimately like that's the product that's created, and that's what you sit with, So I believe in kind of trusting what's created despite the outcome. And I think that's something I learned Soap Opera and Voidman, because it's like you're never going to achieve what you really want to at any level, independent or complete commercial success. So it's good to like compromise, double down, and accept defeat in the right areas to take the dub in different areas.
Take the dub and take your L's where you have to, so you can take your dubs when you can.
Yeah.
I think that's very eloquent. That's a good philosophy. I guess to me, when I think of like justified director's cuts, it's like the studio fucked it up, and so now I can come in and be like, this is actually what it's supposed to be. This is like my artistic vision, right? But yeah, I guess if you sort of at the level of a folk film, obviously, ideally, you would have like control insofar as like my pure unobstructed artistic intent, right? And so there
Yeah.
would be no need for another sort of Voidman sort of cut unless there's like a sequel, unless there's like a spin-off miniseries, uh,
Yeah.
an animated vignette of shorts. Um,
You're really inspiring me here.
yeah, yeah,
Really,
yeah. I'll
really
take
tempting me to go
10%,
back to
but
Countdown.
um, so Voidman comes out. It's Christmas. Um, you it's been a year of you editing, almost, you said, right? 9 months, a year.
It's a year.
It's a year of you editing. So your last summer you spent filming and then a year of editing and it drops on Christmas Day. I mean, what does that feel like? What is the feeling of like not even the reaction yet. It's just like it's out there in the world.
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I just want to tell the story of the export.
Please,
So
please do.
Voidman, the export of Void, and I know you just I believe you just exported your own film because I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's a very when you finally hit that export button, it's just like it's everything is kind of it all rides on this percentage on this bar filling up when you're in that Premiere Pro. I think so for me, the export it took 3 days, but not it wasn't me pressing export and me waiting for 3 days. I basically every single scene I had. So I went out and I bought a new hard drive so I could back up every single scene in the
Mhm.
film. I had ProRes files of everything, so I wanted to back up those ProRes files. So just putting the ProRes file from one hard drive to the next was like a mission because I had to kind of put it onto my laptop. That took like an hour. Then take that, that little 10-minute ProRes file and then export it back onto another hard drive.
Mhm.
That took another hour. And this film is 3 hours long. There's quite a few scenes. So it's like I'm like spending a whole day. I didn't sleep for 72 hours
Oh my
consecutively.
God.
Because this was like December 11th or December 9th or something. And I was like, I'm getting this film done today. Or like before I go to bed, I suppose. And so I did that. I was awake for 72 hours, waiting for that bar to fill up, putting it over, waiting for that bar to fill up, putting it over. I have this little MacBook Pro. I don't know how it achieved this. I'm like, I just don't know how this piece of technology achieved such strenuous pressure. And once I've, finally backed up everything, I had to also adjust. I put all the clips together in the file. That took like 2 hours. Then I had to adjust all the audio because I'd mixed everything to so there were a few scenes earlier on and where I mixed it to -0 decibels, which I in retrospect was like shit, I actually should have dropped this down to -6 decibels. So with the ProRes file, I actually had to go back and drop the sound down to -6 decibels. And then so just waiting for that to like process took another hour and there was like 15 scenes I had to do that for. So it was 15 hours. And then once I finally did all of that and it's like day three, it's day three and it's like it's day two and it's like 7 p.m. I finally click export and 6 a.m. the following day, it finishes, the export finishes. I was awake the entire time and it was like this like religious spiritual experience. I was sitting in my room just like watching the percentage go up. And then there was a time where it hit like 95% and it stopped and my computer started making weird noises and I was like, Jesus Christ, like if this doesn't pan out, if this doesn't export, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life. Like I think I'm gonna have to reconsider everything. It finally, and literally for an hour and a half, it sat at 95%. And I was like terrified. And then finally it hit 96 and then it exported. And once it finished, this just the biggest sigh of relief, the biggest kind of like is done. The weight is off my shoulders. I'm done. I have it. And I just lied back. And for me, that was the moment where I uploaded the film to YouTube. Like that moment where it exported and I had the file. I just took a deep breath and I like lied back. And the film, so I exported the film and it was meant to be 3 hours and 47 seconds. But then I checked the runtime on the file and it was 3 hours and 57 seconds.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, like why is there an extra 10 seconds in there?
Yeah.
And then later on, I figured out why because I figured out why is because on Premiere, when you edit at 24 frames per second, well, you're really actually editing at 23.97 frames per second,
Hmm.
but it assumes that 23.97 frames is 1 second when really 24 frames is 1 second. So there's like a little bit of like extra runtime that it naturally adds. So the film was actually 3 hours and 57 seconds, but it just told me it was 10 seconds shorter. So anyway, after all that, I finally sat down, I watched the film on my laptop, and I thought, wow, I've done it. It's 3 hours. I've done it. Everything, nothing, no weird exporting issue.
Hmm.
And then Christmas Day comes around, and I've like uploaded the film, and it's like scheduled for a Christmas Day release. And I remember sitting in the room where I spent the 3 days exporting, and Christmas Day hit, and the clock struck 12, and the film was out, and I just took a breath and went to bed.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I don't know, it was just a very rewarding. It wasn't like, it was just kind of like it's done, and I'm just like happy that I spent so much time on it and it's just done and I can kind of move forward with life. Um, and then, the next day it comes out and, the reception. And then as time went on, I kind of sat down and was like, fuck, like, what do I do with my life? I've spent 2 years working on this film. I don't know like what I'm doing. I don't know like what, my purpose, my direction in life is anymore. So yeah, it was very surreal, very strange to like, after spending so much time for it to like release, and it's just now it's suddenly behind you, like within 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, there's like before and after, and now you're in the
Yeah,
after, which is
I'm in the
crazy
after.
because you were
It's
in
very well.
during for so long.
Yeah,
Now it's like, oh shit.
it's gone. It's a year ago. It's done.
Do you have this philosophy? I know some filmmakers have it, where do you feel like it's not yours anymore? Like when you release something, it's like, do you know
I
what I mean?
I 100% agree with that philosophy. I like vehemently believe in the death of the artist. Like when you release a product, it's you've killed your own child and now the world has adopted it, kind of thing. Like it's gone, and that's also why I don't really philosophically agree with the director's cut. I don't believe in like, and that's also why I'll never answer the black goo
Ah,
question,
damn it. All right.
uh, because I can't, I just cannot live like I made the film and it has to just exist as it is, forever. And I think honestly, like one of the most ideal ways to really this maybe sounds a little like a little strange, but one of the most ideal ways to release a film is to make the film, release it, and but then you die like right before its release, and so the artist can never be interrogated about anything related to the film, and the film just exists as it is. Um, and I think, the art has to stand on its own. And when it is out there, it's not yours anymore. You can't, go back, you can't tamper with it, you can't recontextualize it. Maybe you can talk about like the creation of it and maybe, and share some stories, but you can't ultimately go back and restructure, what has spoken to people, what has said things to people. Like J.K. Rowling, going back and kind of revising some of her writings in Harry Potter, or
Yeah.
like different artists kind of going back and just saying like, actually, this is how it is. I feel like that kind of defeats the entire point of the art, which is like it's all interpretive, right? Like art speaks to people, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's art is actually like very, very deeply interpretive, and you can really interpret it however which way you want. Um, so yeah, I definitely believe in the death of the artist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a beautiful philosophy. I mean, yeah, you have people like Tony Kaye. I mean, American History X was released in 98 and he's still like
Yeah.
editing it and still,
And
what I
it,
mean? It's just like at some point you have to realize like it's
yeah,
done. You've said what you needed to say with it.
yeah, yeah. I remember watching American History X long ago and researching the Tony Kaye fiasco. I can't actually remember why he hated the film, because it is actually like a very impactful and powerful product. I'm not sure
Great
why he.
movie. Yeah,
Yeah, incredible.
great movie. I don't know. I think he might just be a little nuts.
Yeah,
Sometimes that's all it is. People are just grumpy and like whatever's going on with them, like in here or in here, it's like doesn't really have anything to do. I think also probably Norton has this kind of like reputation of kind of like taking over sets. So I think maybe he felt
yeah,
like Norton sort of like steamrolled him a little bit. Who knows? I wasn't there. I wasn't
yeah.
I was born. I was like, how old am I? Okay, so fine. You don't want to tell me what it means, but just literally what was the black goo? Like how did you practically do that?
What was the black? Can I actually answer this? Should I ethically answer this? No, I think I will.
Uh-oh.
I believe it was black food coloring, and some kind of like some like I don't know, some kind of like liquid. I believe it was like some sort of syrupy,
Mm.
sugary liquid, and then we put a bit of black food coloring in. Um, yeah, that's how we practically made it. It's the same way that I also make blood, right?
Hmm.
I use the kind of the starchy, sugary liquid, and I just put some red food coloring. The black food, it's the exact same philosophy. You just put the black food coloring.
Nice. Okay, so simple. Because it really looks like oil. Like it really looks like you're like it's very well done. It's very viscous, very disgusting. Like
Yeah,
looks really
it
cool.
is. Yeah. Well, I think I will say like the image of Daniel Plainview in There Will Be
Mm.
Blood with the black oil all over him. That was a very kind of striking image, and I think like subconsciously, I wanted to kind of recreate some of that aesthetic. Um, and there's like a ton of things that I pulled from. I think yeah, just PTA. PTA was a huge inspiration in the film, which maybe isn't apparent at first, but then you think about Magnolia, and you
Hmm.
think about the black oil, and you think about I don't know, early PTA is just very inspiring to me. Hard Eight, Boogie Nights, Magnolia era, because he was very young. He wasn't even 30 when he made those three films, and they show incredible talent at youth. And so I wanted to kind of pull from that and try to like tap into what he was tapping into at that age.
Yeah, well, I think you definitely succeeded. Um,
Thank you.
so I don't want to be so like sort of like ask the simple surface level question of like, so what are you working on? What's next? Because like I'm sure you might not even know, but I am curious if you're working on anything now. But regardless of whether you are or not, I guess I want to know like, do you have like a sort of like dream project, which sounds maybe crazy after a Void Man, I think would be most people what they would consider to be like sort of a dream, like a white whale of a project. But do you have something that you're really like barreling towards, or something that's maybe it's like a little far off, but you're like, I'm gonna get there one day? Like what's like the thing for you?
Yeah, I have this. I have a well, I'll answer the first part of that question first, which is am I working on anything right now? I'm not actually working on anything right now.
Hmm.
Um, but I suspect that will change, in the formidable future. I'm actually moving to Amsterdam. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I'm actually gonna be living there alone for a year for uni, and I'm gonna be studying there, and just like that's gonna be a very formative experience. And when I come back, I'm gonna, you know, I can just I don't know. I think of my kind of life with like I try to like have a lot of foresight into like how things are pan out, and I think the filmography is a good way to kind of break that up. Like I'm someone who's very much like inspired by, things that happen in my life, me sitting with it, kind of unpacking it, introspecting, and then kind of expressing that through art. So I'm the type of guy to like, I make a film, it releases, and I live a few years of a life, and I do something else, and then after some time, I sit down and I kind of try to unpack that cinematically.
Hmm.
So, I'm not someone who kind of tries to work on like three different projects at the same time. Um, but I don't know. I did mention this on the Doom Production podcast as well, but there's this in the back of my head. I keep thinking of this black and white film. Like, I think I want to dabble in black and white,
Mm.
for my third feature to, kind of cap off the folk filmmaking trilogy. So I think black and white might be where I go, but it always changes. Like, now that I've said it, I feel like it's almost guaranteed that my next film is not going to be in black and white.
Sure.
Um, but you know, it's I feel like it's so early, so like I'm someone who doesn't like to actually like reveal anything about what I'm working on until
Of
like I'm
course.
like ready to show it. But it's so early on in the conceptual state that I'm comfortable talking about it because it is all susceptible to change. But in terms of the White Whale project, the project that like I want to kind of do, I'm a very ambitious. I try to maintain a lot of ambition in myself,
Hmm.
especially like as I'm so young, and like I know that like age will kind of whittle that ambition away. So I try to maintain a lot of ambition. There is this idea I have in my head, and I don't know, maybe I don't know if I should talk about this, but I feel like yeah, I feel like it's okay. I have this
Hmm.
idea in my head, this series of films. It's called Seven Self Portraits, and
Hmm.
it's seven different films, and it's seven films about my life across seven separate years throughout my entire life. So and I think like that ideally would be, the very, very last thing I make would be this seven self-portraits thing where I make these seven films. And if, my life goes according to plan, which, it won't, it never does, but it's just fun to think about. Like if my life does go according to plan, like I will release these seven films as like the last kind of, kind of document, the last kind of thing that I put out into the world. And then, you can go back and you can see the progression of my life through these 7 years spread out across however long I live, and it can really like contextualize why I made the art, why I made the art I did at the time, because I've been making art since, well, Super came out when I was 17, so I have like a lot of, I want these films to kind of show me at different points in my life.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would just be a great way to kind of cap off whatever my legacy. I do think about my legacy like quite a lot, but which I know is kind of like stupid and like self-aggrandizing, but like I don't know, I think it is important to maintain a level of ambition, because as I approach my 20s, like it's going to be a real, this decade of my life is going to be a real like make it or break it. Like did you succeed, and are you on the right path? And so I fact I can't live life thinking that like I have it all under control. Like I need to have this kind of this push and this drive to achieve things that are very unachievable, to I feel like to actually make it in areas of life. And that doesn't just like extend to filmmaking. I think that extends to everything. You have to be you have to put high expectations in yourself to keep pushing and to keep to achieve great things. So this seven self-portraits thing, it's more of like a kind of a metaphorical, it's more of a metaphor for my life to kind of always try to push and try to live an exciting and a successful life, so that these seven self-portraits are very good and are worthwhile and worth watching. So I think the seven self-portraits is more kind of a, I don't know, a metaphor of like try to live the life you deserve to live, or to live the life you want to.
I think that's really poignant. And hopefully this project is very, very, very far away, because you're going to live a long
Yeah,
time
this is
and make
like
a lot of great
this is
movies.
like when I'm in my 70s or 80s,
Yeah.
like I'm thinking real far ahead.
Real down the line. And then as per your own ideals, you'll die right before you release it. So
That is unironically, that is the plan. Yeah. Like the
you'll
best
just
case
make them, you'll
scenario.
sit on them, and then you have like a, what do they call it? A fail safe. As soon as you go, they're like out in the
Yeah,
world.
literally.
Amazing. Well, I know I've kept you for so long. Thank you so much for joining me and talking about it. I really like
Well,
talking to you.
it was a
The
pleasure.
last thing I want to ask to end it off, I don't want to ask like something as reductive as what your favorite movie is, but what's the most recent movie that you saw for the first time that like, not like really liked, like genuinely like loved, like fell in love with, and share it so that everyone can watch it?
I believe that might have been True Grit, which I watched as the
Mm.
very last film I watched, which I'd never seen before. I think the Coen Brothers, I've never had a the Coen Brothers have had a kind of a tricky relationship with. Like I like some of their films, but I feel like I don't really understand or like kind of get them the way everyone else does. But True Grit, I really loved. But I think that was mainly because of 13-year-old Haley Steinfeld's performance that was like just outshining everyone in the film. It was like a huge kind of surprise. I'm a big fan of like people who can performances that can kind of carry an entire project, or just it can carry a whole thing. And she was really good. But I think it was The Fablemans, which I watched, which was just like a very touching. It was just a very, very like emotional experience for me, because I think it's like I am quite young and I am an aspiring filmmaker, and I think I don't often feel like represented in films, but
Mm.
this was a film that I felt like deeply represented in, and I felt very like wow, that's literally me, Ryan Gosling moment, like that was like
He's just like me.
it's just like me kind of thing, like
Yeah.
that really spoke to me. I think, let me go on my letterbox. I think there's one more film I can name. Um, Avatar. I quite enjoyed Avatar, The Way of Water. I
Very
think
cool.
I'm a very big fan of blockbuster filmmaking. And I think like that is definitely one of my goals in life, is to make the blockbuster that has like, I love the idea of making the blockbuster that has like the perfect amount of commercial viability, but also the right amount of like artistic merit, and the studio and the filmmaker like working together. And it doesn't matter if it's like a painful relationship or a smooth relationship, as long as the product is released and it makes the money, but it also retains the artistry. I think that's like one of my end games in life, is to achieve that. And I think I did, try to do that with Voidman, but I think the commercial viability of it was like in question a little bit. So I think that's something I always chase, is to create the art film that is also a huge success. So I do love blockbuster and blockbuster cinema, and I think when it's done correctly, it's very impactful. And at the end of the day, The Dark Knight Rises, that's the film that introduced me into all of this, and that is like the blockbuster that also maintains a great semblance of artistic merit. Some might even say a bit too much artistic merit, but I think that's it made $1 billion, and I think it's a great example of like what I'm always trying to chase and achieve. And you can even draw parallels between The Dark Knight Rises and Void Man. I think it's just that's like the film that I want to achieve. And maybe going back to your white whale question, I think that's also the white whale that I'm trying to catch.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure you're gonna get there one day, buddy. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Hopefully we'll be able to keep in touch. I can send you my resume. I can send you my agent's name. Like,
Yes. Please do. Please do.
um,
Send me a film. I'm excited to watch. Well, what is this short film you have? Can you plug yourself?
oh, can I plug myself on my own show? Is that ethical? Of
Yeah.
course. I'm always, yeah. So, I'm somebody who's like wanted to make stuff for a really long time, but I guess I'm too much of a scaredy cat. But over the summer, I shot two short films with my really good friends from grad school. So one has already been done. It's out there. I'm really proud of it. It's a little rough technically because I don't know what I'm doing, but everything, it's stepping stone. You learn, right? And
Yeah, 100%.
this new one I am really proud of because it's a little bit bigger in scope. I'm also like really into like sort of like I grew up like watching like the Tarantino stuff, the Scorsese stuff. So like crime stuff is like always back here. And so I made a movie about two hitmen, and one of them has IBS, and it gets in the way of a hit, and neither of them really know what to do about it. And so the movie is sort of about the fallout of an incident where uh, one of the hitmen shits himself.
Wow. Wow. That's actually wow. When is that releasing?
So we're hoping to do like festivals. If
Yeah.
we can get into some festivals, but I'll send you the Google Drive link. And you let me know what you think.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm excited.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, man, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
We definitely will. We definitely will.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.